Hey, it's Drybear. Less than 24 hours after the launch of Season 1 in the First Descendant, and the developers have already put out a post talking about their apologies for the Season 1 mechanics and also what they plan to do very soon to rectify them. Now, if you didn't know, yesterday the Season 1 patch went live, which included Hailey Scott as a new Descendant and also all of the new seasonal progression and gameplay mechanics, and there has been a huge backlash over the gameplay mechanics in the season, particularly around puzzles, difficulty, even difficulty in acquiring Hailey. So this morning, early this morning, the devs have responded with not like an official list of changes, but also just what they plan to do as fast as possible to get the game into the right state, and also just respond to people saying that they don't like the Season 1 and how they want people to look at the game overall, and I think it shows exactly what the devs are trying to accomplish in the long term. So first, I would like to apologize for everyone who had inconvenience since Season 1 update. Everyone's support is appreciated. They're very grateful for people playing the game, and they want to make sure that people are enjoying it, and since people are not enjoying it, they want to make some adjustments. The first one is that they want to reduce the difficulty of puzzle mechanics in the invasion dungeon. So what they want to do is just make it so the puzzle portions of the dungeon, some have puzzle, actually most of them have puzzles, some don't, but they want to make sure that the difficulty of the puzzle mechanics in the dungeon are reduced. Now, to accomplish this, they're going to do a couple things. Firstly, if you did the pillar mechanics yesterday, especially in Echo Swamp, where you have to clear out the tumors to figure out the pattern, then go to the correct drone and activate it in order to survive the explosion of the pillars, they're going to do a couple things to make this a little bit clearer. The first is they're going to be adjusting these symbols that you see, and I think this was just a case of, art and clarity kind of clashing a little bit, because a lot of these symbols are a little bit too complex and intricate for people to easily identify them. I mean, if you looked at them long enough and kind of developed your own moniker or system for identifying them, I don't think it was too bad overall, but they're going to simplify them so they're easier to identify and distinguish between each other. The next is that these pillar systems often had a sequence of 4 symbols total, but there were 6 pillars overall, and 2 of the pillars were duds. You would go to them, you would clear them out, and they would have no symbol on them at all, period. And what they're going to do is they're going to remove those 2 extra dud pillars so that there's only 4 pillars. Every pillar guaranteed has a symbol on it, so all you have to do is go to the pillar and destroy it to make it a little bit easier. And they're also going to modify the monster spawning. There's actually a lot of complaints, especially around those puzzle mechanics where you have to stand still on the puzzle, that a lot of the enemies are spawning with very hyper aggressive auto aim, and they're dealing tons of damage and killing you. And so if you don't have the most optimized defensive build for playing in these encounters, a lot of people are dying, and so they're going to be modifying the frequency and aggressiveness of the monster spawning while you're doing the puzzle. And also people have shared the sentiment that they don't like having to deal with constant battle if they're trying to do puzzle. And I think there's kind of a discussion on whether that belongs in a game like this or not. Let me know what your thoughts are on that specifically. So we already talked about them deleting the dud pillar and simplifying the pattern, but they're also going to be changing the direction of the pillar as well, so it looks at the battle arena. It seems like this was probably intentional, where they had all of the pillars face away, but now they're going to face them all inward, which means that you can stand in the middle with a weapon or with some kind of lobber ability and just blast off all the tumors and shoot at them from the center, and that way you don't have to worry about having to go around and get them. I think this was probably meant to make it a little bit more challenging, but maybe they were just too worried that this was becoming too annoying that you have to move around, and it also does favor the faster characters like Bunny, whereas the slower characters that may want to do this may have to run a little bit too much just to be able to see what the pattern actually is. Next, they're changing the symbol representation over the drones, and I think this was something that should have just been in the game from the start. I think it's kind of silly that it wasn't. So the pillars have a vertical orientation from top to bottom. It's like a stoplight, right? The first spot is on the top, then it goes 2, 3, and 4 on the way down, and then the drones have a horizontal orientation for the symbols, left to right. So left is 1, the far right is 4. They're going to change it so the drones are now vertical to match the pillars. So that's a lot more clear to people that are coming into these mechanics that the patterns are supposed to be the same thing. I think there's definitely, it's very easy to confuse these when you first start doing these dungeons, that you look and you see a vertical pattern with 1 symbol on the pillar, and then you see a horizontal pattern on the drone, and you're not really sure how those correlate in any way. and it takes a little bit of time to adjust and figure out exactly what they're trying to tell you. They're also going to make both of the tumors easier to destroy. So the tumors that cover the pattern and the ones that block the door will be easier to destroy. I don't know if this means that the ones blocking the door can be one cycled now versus two cycled. We'll have to see how much they're going to be aggressively there. So that's going to be it. But the tumors covering the pillars and the tumors covering the door will have less HP overall. And on top of all that, they're also going to make it so tumors never regenerate. So the pillar pattern is going to be simplified. There's vertical orientation for the drones. They're making it so that the tumors do not grow back at all, and they're easier to kill. And all of the pillars are going to be facing the battle arena, so you could shoot them from the center, and there's only going to be 4 of them instead of 6 of them. I think this is like a huge, massive, gargantuan Kraken Giga Godzilla nerf that just makes this very straightforward. So I think, you know, if there is still complaints after all these changes, I'd be surprised if mechanics like these ever return in the future. Next is around the stand-in-place tiles that we saw yesterday as well. Today is all about collecting brains and putting them in a container, but what they're going to be doing is adjusting this puzzle here where it's a stand-in-place and also trying to identify and remember a pattern in your head when you're moving out and standing in the area out in the field. First, the occupation time required is going to be shortened, so you can actually finish the tile much faster, and I think this does help some of the Descendant builds. They weren't tanky enough to stand against the mobs that were shooting at you, so you don't have to run a tanky build if you don't want to, so you can just stand and occupy it. And they're also going to be rearranging the tiles so they're more easily distinguishable. In the current pattern, there were a bunch of tiles that were right next to each other, like right there on the platform, they're right next to each other, so they're going to spread them out a little bit so that it's easier to remember in your head which ones were in which spot. And they're also going to be reducing the number of false tiles as well, so the total number of tiles is going down. They don't say by how much, but they're going to be simplifying this quite dramatically so that it is going to be less tiles, they have less time required to stand on them, and they're more spread out, so it's not as hard to remember where they are. They're also removing the mobs that will come and turn off the tiles, so once you turn on a tile, it will be forever turned on. I think even if it's the wrong one, they'll just turn on and stay on, so you don't have to worry about it. In the color puzzles, symbols will be added so players with color weakness will more easily enjoy the game. I think this is a huge thing that should have been in there in the very beginning. This is just an accessibility thing. I have plenty of friends who are colorblind and different kinds of colorblind, red, green, things like that. And so not having this in the first place is going to be rough. I think realistically, anytime you have a color mechanic, it's nice to either do very safe colors that are easily distinguishable by all color blindness types, or do color alongside symbols. So even if you are a color blindness that doesn't distinguish those colors easily, you can at least distinguish the symbols to make that a lot easier, which is really, really cool. Lastly, the barrier HP for named monsters will be weakened, so you don't need as much damage to take them down. Now, today's dungeons revolve around collecting brains and putting them in a container, and just like with the normal campaign missions, there are specific Vulgus that will try to extract those brains from the container. Although they just fall out of the container, you can grab them and put them back in. That's not really much of a downside, but they do mention in the patch notes that they will be making adjustments to this too to make it easier and more digestible for people. I don't know how you could make this any easier than it already is, but it seems like that they plan to make adjustments to today's collection as well, and also they'll be listening to feedback on what people think about today's dungeons and their mechanics. Another one is a big one, and I agree with this change wholeheartedly. They're going to be taking away the curse portion or the negative portion of the inversion reinforcement system. This is huge for the game. Inside of the inversion reinforcement, which is the seasonal progression, every single one of the bonuses in the progression tree has a positive and a negative downside, and in some cases the negative is quite painful. So what they're going to be doing is they're going to be deleting the penalty from all of them. They will only just be buffs to make your character stronger. You will, I mean, it already has a restriction that you can only have 3 of them active at a time anyways, so I don't know why it needs to have negatives on every single one of them, but they're going to be buffing a lot of the effects to make them stronger, and also removing the negative downside inside the inversion reinforcement system to make it a little bit more impactful for your character builds. The next one is the biggest one, and I think this is probably the change that is going to make people the happiest overall, and probably could have been done by itself and left the mechanics where they were without making much change. But what they're going to be doing is they're going to be putting these changes out next Thursday. There is another change coming shortly that we'll talk about in a second, but they are going to be updating all of the changes that we just talked about next Thursday. However, and this is something they didn't put in the top goals over here, but they slipped it in a paragraph down here. We are planning to add matchmaking systems so players can play the invasion dungeon as multiplayer mode. It doesn't seem like it was designed that way, so they're going to have to do some work to fix it, but it's not going to be in the next week, but for season 1, as soon as possible, they want to make it so that you can group up and do the invasion dungeons. And this is probably going to be the biggest difficulty drop, because a lot of these encounters and a lot of these mechanics were designed to be challenging for one person. But if you have multiple people in the area, you can go up and stand on the platform, 3 people, one person picks one of the 3 platforms to choose. You spread out, you get them done, you jump right through it. For the collection of the brains, everyone spreads out and grabs brains. All of these things become a lot more simple and trivial when you have lots of people in the area doing it. So I think, number one, I think it's just going to be better overall, because solo mechanics in a group game like this is pretty rough, but it is going to make these mechanics a lot easier than they were before. Next, they talk about the drops for Hailey, which they actually confirm in this dev note that they intended for it to be on average a 12-day farm. For a lot of people that were doing the math to see how many days of invasions it would take, on average it would take about 13 days. That's actually by design. They wanted this to take about 2 weeks to get Hailey, and a lot of people are upset that it's taking that long. So what they're going to be doing is the invasion and infiltration operation drops will be increased. So the drop rate that you'll get from these is going to be increased. On the invasion dungeons, you're guaranteed at least 1 as long as you complete the dungeon or complete the invasion. So you'll be able to get 1 at the end of it regardless, and then you have a chance to increase that drop count based on how fast you complete it. The infiltration operations are all mission monster drops, and the drops are pretty small. And in many of these infiltration operations we discovered yesterday, the drops only come from the final boss or from major elites with a pretty low drop rate. So it does take quite a long time to farm Hailey. With just invasions, I think it's about 13 or 14 days. If you're doing the infiltration operations regularly, you can probably do it in about a week or more, or less if you're lucky. But they want to drop that down. So the drop rate is increasing for all of her pieces, including the ultimate quality data chip at the end. And they're going to be increasing the drop rate for the research material about 2 times faster. So they're just going to make it about twice as fast. I'm guessing that means that it's going to take an average of 6 days to get this, and maybe faster if you work harder. And this will be out Saturday. So just the change for Hailey's drop rate is out tomorrow. So in like the next 24 hours, we should be seeing the drop rate adjustment for Hailey. And then next Thursday is when the invasion changes are coming. So we have basically a full week of doing daily invasion dungeons as they are now, with 5 million gold a day coming in until next Thursday. But tomorrow we should be seeing the update for the Hailey drop changes going live. They're also kind of in panic mode. They're saying that they're going to be having a focus group testing. This is something that is very common in Chinese development. They rely on focus groups a lot, like far more than I think any other area. Like China does a ton of focus group testing in their groups, and it sounds like they're going to want to be doing more of this with Nexon. And I think when you have a big company like Nexon, finding friends and relatives and family members and local colleges and high schools and stuff that can bring people in to do focus testing is going to be pretty big. Part of me wonders if they really need a focus group to test some of these things. To be honest, I feel like a lot of these things could have been caught very easily, depending on who's looking over the gameplay development and things like that. But that's probably a topic for another video. So they'll be gathering that feedback, and they do value the opinions. They're very apologetic. They're moving incredibly fast, and they're already working on a fast update that is major content reworks on the game to try and keep it here. I think it's pretty obvious that they do really want people to be playing the game and enjoying it. They're very much invested in it, and they want to try and make it as good as possible. So let me know what you think about all these changes and nerfs going into Season 1 changes overall. I think the best changes are probably the matchmaking going in for the invasion dungeons, and specifically removing the penalty away from the seasonal progression mechanics to make it a lot more enjoyable and buffing your character rather than feeling like it's a weird exchange. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.